And we are back, and it is time for the ElseWords. This is our main discussion topic point of the evening, and ours. This is coming from IO9, and that is Kevin Feige thinks that eventually Marvel TV and movies will cross over. And in no duh news, um, but no, the
Well,
past.
but is it no done news? Because the reason why he has to say this now is that we've gone back and forth. The
Yeah,
original implication was that all the Marvel stuff from the cinematic universe and the TV universe was connected. And then slowly we started seeing that that wasn't exactly the case. Now, the first indicators were in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where we would see movie things come and affect the show, but we wouldn't see the show actually affect the films. Um, After the fact stuff of like, oh yeah, all those helicarriers that showed up at the end of Age of Ultron, that's because Coulson had them on ice and he had them ready for us and everything. We see that on the show, but we don't get any of that in the movie. Then I've talked before about the comparison of Marvel to when they got the Ultraverse, and Ultraverse got kind of taken over by Marvel's reject characters for a while.
yeah.
But then when they went back to the Marvel Universe, none of the Ultraverse shit got mentioned at all in the regular Marvel books because you're the lesser than. And for the TV stuff, that's kind of how it's been treated, as the lesser than. So we see the Avengers Tower in the background in Daredevil and a couple of the other Netflix shows, but we're not hearing about the Devil of Hell's Kitchen in the Marvel movies at all so far. And they've
Yeah.
said less and less likely that that's going to happen. Is like, oh, you're probably not going to see the Defenders characters show up in the movies because it's hard to get them together to do these shows as it is. You know, these are not necessarily like huge movie stars, but they're certainly stars on the rise. And in between their Netflix obligations, they're probably going to have more stuff that they're going to get picked up on going forward. And so to bring those contracts in, and if you want to get another season of Daredevil, you may get that instead of seeing Daredevil show up in Avengers Infinity War. And there's been a breakdown in the relationship between the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Kevin Feige and the TV stuff, which has been more in the hands of Jeff Loeb and under the control of Ike Perlmutter, who is not happy that he doesn't have full control of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, he feels like Feige's gotten too much of that wrested away, and that's why we have things like where the Inhumans were at one point going to be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and now they've been regulated. While they'll still get a film in IMAX before it appears, it's now going to be a TV series instead. So is there still going to be an Inhumans movie as well, or is that something completely different, or is that cut off? Because Marvel Comics has been pushing the Inhumans a lot,
Yep.
but they couldn't quite make that work in the cinematic universe, and they probably just said, well, we don't really want them.
So I look at this a um in a couple different ways, and that's where can they tell the best stories? Like maybe with Daredevil, maybe with like Daredevil, Iron Fist, um, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage. The answer was TV, but not just TV, Netflix. And with Cap, Thor, Captain Marvel, the Guardians, that was in the movie theaters, on with movies. And so I think a lot of that is like, the Inhumans are like, well, where can we get the better stories? And I don't think um I think they went with the whole, it might be better off as a TV show. We could probably tell more stories. We've been building it up, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and we could get a crossover between the two, you know, going on there. Now,
Yeah, but that's part of I think the problem though is when you look at it, do you want to introduce your second or third, in this case, ABC series based off of what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is doing, which has been not great in the numbers consistently since the beginning, or would you rather it come directly from the Marvel movies? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, they introduced elements of the Inhumans in the TV series, and I think that made it feel more like whatever happens with the Inhumans now has to happen from TV as opposed to the films.
Yeah.
And so they kind of put themselves into a box that they couldn't escape from.
Yeah. Now, Top Knot asks a question, which I'm going to answer the first part. The first part is no. He asks, are they going to do a Daredevil movie though, or is it going to matter to those of us who haven't watched that show? Basically, the answer is no, because they're not going to do a Daredevil movie. The rumors have always been, with Infinity War, with it being so big that they would do that. This would be a good part to bring in at least the Marvel Netflix shows characters.
But I think what Top Knot is asking is because of the fact that you're looking at a different medium to have to know these characters. If you see the movies and you go to the movies and you see these characters and stuff like that, and then you see the fucking films repeated ad nauseum on TBS and TNT all the time, because they've been playing the shit out of them, which is fine because I like to rewatch them all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean, yeah, FX. Sorry, that doesn't actually mean that you're also necessarily subscribed to Netflix and familiar with that other portion of stories. So to say, yeah, here's Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and they all show up in Infinity War, for a good part of the audience, they may not know who they are. And how do you establish them when you've already got so many other characters up on the screen taking up real estate? And already we're having an expectation that if you're watching Avengers 3, that you must have seen all the other Marvel movies that lead into that. If you're watching Avengers, you might have watched the Captain America, the Iron Man, the Thor stuff to get into the Avengers in the first place. But then it also presumes, likely, but not 100%, that you recognize the Guardians of the Galaxy.
And I don't want to, say, like, dissuade, Top Knot's question or his follow-up, with, with basically with saying what you're saying. But at the same time, it's one of those things where if they were to, like, hypothetically bring in, the Defenders for Infinity War, and bring in the Inhumans, and maybe bring in, Colt, like, actually, I would stay away from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because they would need something.
Although, but that's kind of the whole point too, is that Coulson is the one entry point that makes sense from the TV stuff. He's the one guy who 100% has been established in the films already. And so to not be able to use him out of everybody else is kind of a kick in the nads, but they would know him, and it's been this constant thing of like, when are they going to fucking tell Tony and Pepper that Coulson's alive?
But here's honestly, though, the workaround around it. The Sokovia Accords, something that happened because of one of the movies, but had more effect, it seems like, at least a little bit, in the other movies. Because what you do is, it's the Superhero Registration Act from the comic books. So this is how they know, because, Maria Hill and Nick Fury, they have a database on all these people. That's how Tony Stark found out about a little kid over in Queens that was building himself a suit and was going around swinging from building to building like his fucking Tarzan, and then found out that his aunt, who is way too young, sorry, side note, and that he has the hots for, exists, sort of deal. I could see it being possible. It wouldn't be a big plot point. If it ever were to be brought in, it would not be a big plot point, because of the fact, like Top Knot is saying, there are people who only watch the movies and don't watch the shows. Or maybe they only watch, the Daredevil Netflix show, but they don't watch Luke Cage or Jessica Jones or Iron Fist or whatever. But at that same time, at that same time, it would be like, it would be an Easter egg. You know, like seeing Stan Lee in any fucking Marvel movie that's
Right.
out
And
there.
but as an Easter egg, is that going to satisfy the fans? It's the lip service of the DC universe is different in the films versus the DC universe in the TV series, but it's a multiverse thing. So absolutely they could cross over. It'll never fucking happen. It will never happen. But the idea is like, but we could, and the promise is there that it absolutely. So you just have to create this idea of well, they both exist, and if we did a flash of fucking 19 worlds because he's already gone to so many other fucking Earths in the show, then certainly we could do this, but we never fucking will. And the idea of the TV stuff affecting the movies is that sure we could have the Agents of Shield because Shield has been a big part of multiple films so far. Could have them show up, should have them show up, but then we also have to take into account that the TV actors would then have to elevate to a level to match the gravitas of the actors in the movies. And we are talking about some Oscar-winning actors in these movies compared to not really Emmy-winning actors in the show.
Yeah. And I think we're getting at a point, and I don't want this to sound like I'm picking on Top Knot, but he's asking, you know, like he's not asking for an exposition dump, but at least some information on who these people are. And I get that. And that's probably one of the reasons why it would be so hard to do a crossover, a big crossover between the like the movies and the TV, you know.
I can tell you exactly what they need to do. I can tell you exactly what they need to do. They need to approach it from a let's blow the budget and do a 90-minute made for TV, put out an ABC movie where they have one or two of the Avengers, the actual Avengers, show up and have a team up with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to establish a reconnection between those characters. Because people who would go see the movies would say, well, fuck yeah, I'm watching this show because goddamn Captain America shows up in it. You know, and it's not Sif, but it's not some other random fucking Thor character. It's the goddamn Avengers themselves. It could even be Hawkeye and Vision or something. Just fucking make that shit happen so that we get some establishment of the TV universe connecting to the film universe, and then it puts it into the continuity again, and it opens up the door of them showing up in the movie next. And if they say, oh, well, I didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., all you have to do is watch this 90-minute movie. You can get it on DVD. You can stream it on ABC's fucking streaming channel. You can watch it on Netflix. It's available to you, but you have to get that out there soon.
Yeah.
Agent Carter got to be on her TV series and still show up in the films. But in the films, they don't reference the TV series. It's just kind of like it's bonus stuff, but they still let her exist in the movies at the same time. So we had that back and forth. If the series had lasted longer, we might have seen some stuff of like Agent 13 when she was young, something that could have made the character feel more connected between the two. And she was our connection to S.H.I.E.L.D. at that point, in the future sense. I think it's doable. It's just, how do you do it in such a time frame when you've already got so much that you want to bring up on screen? And if we're talking about Avengers 3 and 4, which is kind of what we're assuming, is we have to establish a relationship between the Guardians and the Avengers already. Yeah. And so to say, and then here's this third team, and then here's the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that you might not have met. It's a lot to put into what is, yeah, two blockbuster films, but that's just so much to do. And that's hard to write in a believability and a buy-in from the audience sense. I would love it. I absolutely love it, because that, to me, the interconnected universe is why I like Marvel Comics. It's why I like DC Comics. It's all these characters exist in the same world and then they can cross over. But I'm also sick as shit of the always having to cross over, and I can't just buy one book and enjoy it for itself. I have to read fucking Secret Empire and all of its spinoffs to know what's going on with the character that I want to actually collect. I don't want to see the films do that, but they kind of already have, because it's not like there's just a trilogy of Iron Man, and it's not like there's just a trilogy of Captain America. There are 20 fucking Marvel films already, and it's just going to keep going from there. And unlike Star Wars, which I think once it gets past its trilogy and these interstitial movies that are happening right now, is eventually it's going to start doing new stories with new characters. Marvel is certainly introducing new characters into their overall universe, but they're still having those characters intersect by way of power gems with the rest of the Marvel characters. So it's like, well, if I'm just into Doctor Strange, can I just watch Doctor Strange? Well, today, mostly, but a year from now, no. If I just like the heist film aspect of Ant-Man, can I just watch Ant-Man and Wasp? Well, not really, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some references to what happened in Civil War in the next Ant-Man, because he's kind of on the fucking run, and you're going to have to have seen that. It's a huge thing. It's a huge undertaking, and I appreciate it because I am the geek fan who loves that.
Yeah.
But that is a huge thing to ask of the non-geek, super geek fan who doesn't watch all the shows at the same time.
And that's where, like I'm seeing in the chat, B and Top Knot, going back and forth on this stuff a little bit, and where I get the whole, Beat brought up the point of, well, Black Panther's introduction didn't pose a huge drawback in Avengers 2. And then Top Knot goes, well, nope, there was a hint that his story would be expanded on at a later time. And I think that's going to have to be part of it, is if they were to introduce anyone, whether it be, Phil Coulson, the Guardians, they would probably have to do some expanding on, like how do they get brought in, because I can see how they bring in any of these groups besides the Guardians. Like the Guardians I could see if they had a scene that set them up of like okay, Drax gets some word that Thanos is here. All right, we're going here because I must kill Thanos. And Gamora, same thing with Gamora and
that's just it. They introduced Drax and Gamora's relationships to Thanos in the very first Guardians film. We got more of Thanos in Guardians than we have in any other movie so far. So that does kind of give you the reasoning. And we know Thanos has had hands in the Avengers plots since the end of the first Avengers movie. And that works.
But here's I guess here's the point I'm getting at with why I think we could still see this. Look at Civil War. How did we get Spider-Man? How did we get Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to begin with? Because Tony Stark heard of a kid.
Which then says, well, then why would Tony Stark, of all people who hacks the shit out of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s files, not know about all of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s characters, including the fact that Coulson's alive?
Maybe he's holding on to it for a time he needs it.
I'm sure when the moment comes when Coulson shows up on the screen that Tony's going to be like, yeah, I knew that. Because he's always got to be the smartest man in the room, and he likes to one-up Cap as much as he possibly can. But the same reaction is then, well, then it kind of defeats some of what we want to see from that happening. And what does Coulson and the team bring to it at that point? What do all these characters bring that we don't already have? When you look at the power sets alone of the Defenders, like it's, in some ways they're more powerful than a couple of the Avengers, sure, but they don't have the experience. They don't have the cool gadgets and the fucking paychecks that go along with it. So what do they bring to the movie that we're missing?
Yeah.
And then they have to go back to their TV universe and exist there again and not be like, oh shit, you know what? I got some hefty stuff going on over here where I could really use a little bit more of a powerhouse to join up with me. Can I borrow one of you Avengers? No, you're not taking my calls right now? Okay, fuck you.
And so I think we're getting to more of why it won't why it won't happen.
Right. And we haven't even taken into account some of the new shows that are still coming out, like Runaways and Cloak and Dagger. And how tied in are they to these other shows, being on completely different networks yet again? Do they get to
or the
reference
new
Avengers or Defenders or Shield or
yeah.
any of that stuff? Or is that flavoring that they're going to leave out of these? I've always been kind of a too much happens in New York for my fucking tastes in the Marvel universe. It's like
Uh-huh.
you can't have that many superheroes hanging out in New York because literally they're going to be bumping into each other all the fucking time. But that is what the universe has always been established as. I like the idea of there are characters that exist in this world that are obviously, if superheroes are part of the fucking palette, then there are superheroes that are going to exist that aren't Avengers, that aren't Defenders, that aren't hanging out with Doctor Strange's at his Sanctum Sanctorum, and all these things. But then you go and you ruin that by saying, well, for the next couple of years, all the new superheroes that come out, it's because of the fucking Terrigen Mists. So here's our cool Miss Marvel character, and here's our Kid Kaiju, and here's Moon Girl, and it all ties into the Inhumans for some reason. We can't give them their own actual identities. And then we're going to team up time-displaced Cyclops with Vision's daughter and Amadeus Cho Hulk and all these things that, again, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you just see it. It's how much of this is just kind of forced because you have another team name that you want to use and you need to fill up that book with characters. That's why I like books like The Runaways. That's why I like things where they get to do their own stuff. Even a legacy book like Young Avengers was still, these were kids who kind of met and knew each other and gathered on their own, but they weren't gathered by the other people. It was something that they decided to do. And it feels a little bit more intimate and almost more realistic than that.
And I think Top Knot's got a pretty interesting question here that we might have to, that we probably should answer. Are they going to decide that there's an end to the story, or are they just going to let it expand and infatuate like the comics do? I mean, because it's always turned out well for comics, is his statement on that. I would honestly, like, yes, the world will exist where, yes, there will be a backstory, because it's always seemed easy for me. And fuck you, Beatmaster, I did get the 21 or 2001 reference. Sorry, this is quickly falling out of hand. But where, where I know, and a lot of people who read comic books understand, there's 75, 80 years of history when it comes to the big two, when it comes to Marvel or DC. Looking at, we just had Free Comic Book Day. The backup story for their Secret Wars Free Comic Book Day was the amazing, or what was it? Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, written by Chip Zdarsky. And they introduced a new trickster. Now, I missed that part. I didn't get to that part, but or not trickster, trapster. And there's a part there where, like, wait, like, is it trapster? Like, you take off the E and all that stuff, and like you're the new hipster trapster sort of thing. And it's one of those things, like, you can continue on while acknowledging history, but not having to wrap up anything. I think, Avengers 3 and 4 is going to be that, it's going to end part one, like book one of this. And then we're going to start book two, where we might get other characters that, wouldn't necessarily be, the prime, Avengers. This is where we get into, like, where we get to some of these characters where, like, they were an Avenger. It's like, hells yeah, they were an Avenger.
Well, I mean, so that what you're describing in a comic book sense works, or has worked. And there's a lot of arguments against that, because look at how many times DC has rebooted their universe to explain how Superman can still be 30 years old 80 years later. You can't do that to the same degree in movies without replacing actors, because Some of these people are in their 50s. And the other question about that then is, how interested am I in a Marvel universe where I don't have Robert Downey Jr. and Tony Stark, and when I don't have Chris Evans and Captain America? How interested do I remain? And does the Avengers, just a name, get to go on, or are the Avengers the characters that we've kind of seen in that team, and then the Doctor Strange and the Captain Marvel and these other characters that they're going to be introducing, do they have to form some other group? That's kind of the question. Is at some point, comics, we've developed the ability to accept that it's an ongoing drama that never ends, like a daytime soap opera. But even on daytime soap operas, your Robert Scorpios and your Anna and Duke and Felicia and Frisco and all those characters have to leave because the actors can't play them anymore realistically, or we've moved on and we've developed, other things have come in and taken over, and it's the universe that exists, but the characters and the people come and go.
Yeah.
But when the characters and the people are so inherent to the joy that we get from watching these movies, is that it is like there's a swelling of it. We can't just like say at some point, well, so everybody moves to another Earth, and on that Earth we get a new Tony Stark, and we get a new Steve Rogers, and we get a new that doesn't quite have the same thing. So in Top Knot's statement, I kind of do think in many ways they talk about Avengers 4 being kind of a final note for the characters that they've existed. It's just then, but we already know that there's so much more that's still going to happen. And if the stuff with Black Panther happens post this, and we know that Winter Soldier is hanging out with Black Panther, then we get more Winter Soldier, but then we don't get a closure on Winter Soldier and Cap if Cap's gone. You know, and there's characters that I haven't spent enough time with. I want way more Falcon than I've been given, but I want Falcon and Cap. You know, I love that pairing, and I want to see that continue. And so, yeah, fucking re-up Chris Evans' contract, guys. But it is a point of like, but how far can they go? And how far can they keep going? Comics and films can't play by the same rules. Cartoons can. But live action films, it's something else. And I'm not prepared, as much as I've accepted Don Cheadle replacing Terrence, whatever his name is, unfortunately, Terrence Howard as War Machine in the first one. I can live with that because he wasn't even a primary character in that one. But I'm not prepared to see Tony Stark be played by somebody else. I'm not prepared to see Thor be played by somebody else.
I think that's, bear with me on this, I think that's where we're going to have to get to do a clever comic book trope. We are in the middle of it with quite a few of the characters right now. Tony Stark is dead in the comics. Well, dead. I'm using air quotes in there because he's like in this vegetative state, but is now an AI sort of thing where we now have Ironheart. You look at Captain America, you know, Steve Rogers, just 2-3 years ago, he was an old man because he sacrificed the super soldier serum that kept him young and fit and looking like the buff Chris Evans is now, and not the 100 and some odd year old man that he would be from being born and fought in World War II. You go of one of two ways. Either you kill off the character, like you kill to where the actor has that wrap up because, you know, like Robert Downey Jr. is in his 50s and all that. And then you go, you know, you bring in a legacy character. So you bring in a James Rhodes as Iron Man, or, you know, like the Patriots, or I'm trying to think of or like Nomad or whoever to take over Captain America for a little bit, because there have been other people other than Falcon and Bucky to be Captain America. And then, oh hey, we found we found Cap again, and it's not Chris Evans. And yes, there will be outlet backlash and all that stuff, but I look at this as as a wrestling fan. You can't have wrestlers wrestling all the time, even though they're older, because otherwise you're going to get people like Big Bad Vader who just want to die in the ring. It seems like, there
Yeah,
has.
but now here's one I'm going to point out. It was just a few weeks ago that we had the story where Marvel determined that a lot of these legacy characters and a lot of the changes from the original characters that people already loved to these other new versions of those characters, they felt was being looked at as part of the reason why their numbers are struggling right now, and they're trying to get back to their classics again. I love legacy characters when the legacy characters actually get to perform on their legacy, but I also like new characters a little bit more because new characters get to be their own thing. They're never considered the B team. They're never considered the also-rans. They're never considered the runner-up. And that's really conceptually what a problem is going to be for fans. Is I don't want Tony Stark's brother. I don't want Steve Rogers' clone. I want the people who, that's my Cap, that's my Han Solo. That to me is going to be something that can backfire very quickly. And you're much better off, and I'm glad that Marvel is doing this, you're much better off introducing other characters and giving them their own franchises, like the Black Panther and Captain Marvel, than introducing the new Cap. I don't want a new Cap. I mean, not just because Cap is my favorite character in the Marvel universe, but because I don't want Falcon to be Cap. I want Falcon to be Falcon because I think Falcon is himself super fucking cool and one of my favorite characters.
I look at this as one of two ways. I look at this as either it's going to have to be sort of something like My Way, where we bring in legacy characters for a little bit and then do a soft reboot with new actors playing Captain America and Iron Man and all these other guys, because Robert Downey Jr. is in a wheelchair and he's up for the role of Professor Xavier. Or we do the Amazing Spider-Man thing where after 3 years we're like, okay, and that's a wrap, folks, and we do new casting for these people 3-4 years later, where it could be maybe 10-15 years later if we do the legacy stuff right. And then we're just telling the same stories. That's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, is they look at the actors and like, oh, it's the actor who makes the character. I'm like, for the movies, yes, but if you can find someone out there who can do just as good of a performance or bring something different to the character, then you can get more stuff out of this. Because also keep in mind, there is 80 years of material that they can pull from. They have barely scratched the surface of stories that they could pull from the comics.
Yeah, but if you look at the comics, they're repeating stories there.
Well, true, but still. So even then, with the repeats, you would probably say what, 60 years of stories there.
And not all those stories were gold either. I don't necessarily think I ever need to see Werewolf Captain America happen in the films. I don't think I need to see Tony Stark get killed and then come back as a teenager in the films. I don't think I need to see Thor get replaced by Beta Ray. No, fuck yeah, I do. Yeah, I'll watch a Beta Ray Bill film. Fuck yeah, I will.
Oh, hell yeah. But the point I'm making with this, though, is
but Thor Frog
is only in a Guardians movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The point I am making with this is you can't, like they've told the Civil War story. They've told the origins of and the culmination of the Avengers story. They've told all these stories that have happened in comic books.
I ain't told a goddamn Black Widow story.
True, but hashtag feminism, insert another hashtag here, like I'm John Oliver. And it's one of those things, like, when they're taking a risk and I'm going to call it a risk. And I am a member of the Carol Corps, so sit down, shut up for a second. By going with Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, a character who has only been Captain Marvel for like 5 years. That to me is more riskier than doing Captain America or doing any of these other things. And all that. Even doing Deadpool, because they have more things that you could pull from. With this, it's getting more into Hellboy territory, where I wouldn't be surprised if they had, if we see news of Kelly Sue DeConnick ghost wrote some of the stories, because of the fact that she's the one who really helped this character explode and become the phenomenon that she is.
Well, but you're discounting how much of Carol was written before she was Captain Marvel.
Not really, because I mean, yes, you could pull some stuff from that, but a lot of that stuff is tied in with franchises that are in other wheelhouses.
Well, not necessarily, because Miss Marvel, the original character, was tied into Marvel, which is not part of any other franchise, and which they're probably going to use to establish some of her origin in this. Now, when you get to when she becomes binary, you can do the binary stuff without involving the X-Men. And everything else that she did post that was still Avengers related. As Miss Marvel, as Warbird, there's still a lot of things that you can utilize her for, and you can put her into Thunderbolts. You can involve a lot of that stuff. It's just the question of, are these things going to exist in a way that is going to be a suitable replacement for what people already have and expect from their Avengers movies? Or are they going to be the new Avengers, which is a perfectly reasonable title to kick it over from the comics to the films. But I wonder if people are going to be as accepting of that, not because of gender, not because of race, but because we love our Avengers. We absolutely love our Avengers. We love our Tony Stark. We love our Steve Cap. We love all these characters already. Losing them is going to be hard. It's like losing your cat. My cat is 19 years old. I know he's not going to be around forever. And I know that it's important for me to be prepared, one, for him to go, but two, to find love again with my next cat.
I'm sorry, but
I can handle, but it's the truth. It's the reality. And so in the way of the Avengers, it's like, okay, yeah, the Avengers themselves are probably going to go at some point, whenever that is. If it's not in Avengers 4, we know it's going to happen eventually. How quickly will I be ready to love the next Avengers? It's the same thing we were talking about with the Game of Thrones spinoffs. It's like, once I'm done with Game of Thrones, am I then ready to jump into the next Game of Thrones spinoff, or do I need to back away for a while?
Yeah. This is something that is interesting, because you reminded me of a point. You're talking to a person who his first comic book character that he loved was Spider-Man. I had to watch them reboots, turn around, and I said it as a Spider-Man fan. They rebooted Amazing Spider-Man way too soon. I got burned. And yeah, I loved every single Spider-Man movie that has come out so far. And I'm pretty sure I will love Homecoming. But I look at all this stuff and I go, it seems way too quick. This is why I think I pitched the bring in a legacy character, bring in bring in an Ironheart to take over for Iron Man for a little while before we secretly recast him, but then bring in new Iron Man, hey, look, it's Tony Stark, and not address it or whatever. But I don't know. I don't.
When we look at examples like that, I mean, one, what you're talking about with Spider-Man is itself part of the problem, because they did the Sam Raimi ones, and then very quickly after, they rebooted and they started doing the Amazing Spider-Man series, and then after the second one of that, they realized that wasn't working either. I think the only saving grace for what they're doing right now is the fact that they have the tie into the Marvel Universe. They established him with a connection to them with Captain America Civil War, and involving Tony as Iron Man in the new Spider-Man movie. I think that is something that was very well thought out and planned and paid for, and is going to give them a return that they would not otherwise get if they were just going to give us a third try at Spider-Man. Without that, I think people would be not anxious to go see that movie again. The other way of looking at it is what the X-Men have done, which is they time hopped and they went backwards and they put younger actors in the role by going back in time. But as you and I have watched these other films where they've done that, and then they're making the jump forward every 10 years to the next decade of it, our reactions have not been great. My reactions to those films have not been great at all. The last two X-Men movies to me have been almost unwatchable, and it's not because the actors aren't good, and it's not because I have such a huge problem with them replacing characters, but just the delivery of, like, we fucked up the X-Men so much, and even going back in time to correct everything, we still can't make any goddamn sense out of it. It plays off as a stupid fucking idea, and this is something that, I mean, the comic books, they do all the goddamn time. Because in comic books, there's a different buy-in than there is in movies. And so what Marvel has been good about is taking the base core ideas and the best parts of the comics and then making something that still feels real and grounded in the films. And I'm sure that Feige and the team that are working on these movies have plans in place for this. They know he himself is going to hit his end game with, like, how much he's going to be working on these Marvel movies, because at some point he's going to want to retire, because I'm sure he's super fucking rich and can buy Australia. Kick down, I like Australia. Invite me over sometime. I'll watch all your goddamn movies with you. I just know that, yes, there's probably something in place to where they're going to get to. We know the cash cow has done all it can do for us, and here's where we close it and we give over the keys to somebody else and say, now you make your Marvel universe. When we're going to get there, because as we go along, we keep establishing new things that are interesting, but those new things still kind of hold hands with the part that we love that was our entry point in. You know, it's all tied to Tony Stark from the very beginning, and, you know, Samuel Jackson is Nick Fury and all these things. And so it's going to be hard when those portions of it that were the entire foundation for this beautiful thing that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, when that kind of breaks down. You know, it's going to be hard to accept that and still feel the same joy when I go into these movies. Because right now I go into these things and I'm like, Ant-Man, cool, sure. Oh my God, but look at how Ant-Man interacts with everything else. You know, look how Ant-Man has ties into S.H.I.E.L.D. and what happened to S.H.I.E.L.D. and how it ties into these other things. Like, that's even cooler. And Doctor Strange, cool. And, oh, what's that? Doctor Strange, there's a fucking power gem here? Of course there is, because the power gems are what this whole fucking thing's about right now. But that's going to disappear because we're going to fight Thanos. We're going to deal with the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Gems. So what is then the tying factor, and what's going to tie the audience to these other characters at that point? Is it just going to be because, well, I saw Black Panther and I thought he was neat, and so I'll keep watching Black Panther, even though there's not this other portion of it that it all goes into again? That's a big question. It's a big risk to kind of, like, look to pay off. On the other hand, I don't know that I'll ever get sick of seeing the Guardians of the Galaxy crew and all the stuff they're doing. And I don't know that I'll ever get sick of seeing the Marvel films as they are established right now, because they are so consistently good. They're not always great, but they are always good. They are always enjoyable at this point. So I'm not trying to downplay what they're doing and where they're going to go, because at this point I can't not have faith in them. But it begs a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And that's why it's up to smarter people than me.
Same here.